thank you for watching my channel today. My name's Sarah and my channel is called Your Tree Shelf. Today, this is the third time that I'm filming this video. I filmed it twice already, and then both times the microphone made this horrible screechy noise over the top of the whole recording. So I'm kind of scared that it will happen again. I think if it does, I might just have to not do a wrap up for the month of January because I'm really bored of talking about these books now, even though I really like them. So I'm going to give this a go doing this again. Hopefully I'll still be able to give you a good review of all of the books that I read. So I read 6 books in the month of January, the first of which was an audiobook which started off my year well because it was one of the goals that I had for this reading year. I wanted to listen to some of my oldest audiobooks, and this one was my oldest audiobook, and it was The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. This is a book which is very difficult because the subject matter is very distressing. It's about a couple called Nuri and Afra. Nuri is a beekeeper. He keeps bees with his cousin Mustafa, and they live in Syria, and they have a son who sadly gets killed when war breaks out in Syria. And Mustafa leaves Syria quite early because the country is becoming extremely dangerous to live in. They're in Aleppo and it's just very hard to survive day to day and extremely dangerous. And so Mustafa leaves and makes it to the UK, and he emails with Nuri during the course of the book trying to persuade him to come to the UK as well. Afra is very reluctant to leave because her son's body is still in Aleppo and she doesn't want to leave it behind. And also Afra has become blind during one of the attacks, and so it must be even more scary for her to travel because she is blind. And so this book follows them as they decide that actually they do need to leave and they want to head to England. And it follows their journey through different refugee camps, very dangerous crossings of oceans, and also just completely not knowing who they can trust. It also covers a lot of distressing stories. So you hear from other refugees who have come from other countries in the world and about what's led them to leave their homes and try and make it to other destinations, usually in Europe. And I think this would be a book for anybody who feels that they don't like the idea of immigration, and anybody who's upset by the fact that people come to the UK and other countries, anybody who is prejudiced against refugees. I think this would be a book that anyone who has those feelings should read, because it would really make you understand, it does really make you understand what it's like for somebody to leave everything they've ever known and move somewhere where they are not made to feel welcome and where they don't have the right documentation and things, and the struggles that they've been through to get to that point, and the struggles that they face as soon as they've made the decision that that's what they're going to do. This is an incredibly heartbreaking book, and it will make you feel a lot of empathy. And that's where, as I always say, being able to walk in someone else's shoes for a little while just gives you so much more understanding than if you'd never read that book. And it also covers things like PTSD, functional illness. So I found that it was an amazing book. I gave it 4.25 stars just because I didn't obviously enjoy reading all of the trauma, but I thought it was a very important book. The second book that I read was one for January's TBR Spin. So this is hosted by Sarah from Freshly Read Books and Jill from the Book Billy. You start the year by picking out 12 books. You get a prompt from a spin wheel each month, which Sarah or Jill films. And then if you don't have a book on your stack that can fulfill that prompt, you have to swap one out and swap a new one in. So I had to do that swap for my first prompt, which was a Canadian book. And I chose Washington Black by Edugyan. This is my second book by Edugyan. I read Half-Blood Blues in, I reckon it was about 2010, 2012, and I really, really loved it. And this is a completely different book. This is following Wash, or Washington, who is an 11-year-old slave in a plantation in Barbados. There's a very cruel plantation owner who is absolutely despicable in how he treats the slaves that are on his plantation. And it starts with Wash kind of hearing about Wash and his life as a slave, and the things that happen to him and those who he loves around him. And then the slave owner's brother, Titch, comes and stays there. He's kinder, and he is an engineer, and he is making this kind of flying machine that he wants to get progressing with, and he needs an assistant, and he chooses Wash to be his assistant. Wash turns out to be amazing at doing technical drawings and all kinds of drawings, and he is very quick to learn all of the things that Titch is doing, and he becomes a really invaluable help to him. And it's all going quite well until a third member of the family comes to the island, ends up dying, and then because Wash sees his death, even though he's in no way involved in his death, he knows that he's going to be blamed for the death. So Titch and Washington go on the run in this flying machine, and then it turns into quite a different book where it's more of an adventure story, but the theme of the relationship between Titch and Washington is how much can we trust Titch, as Washington's in a completely foreign place, he's a slave on the run. What's going to happen to him? That becomes like the focus of the next part of the book. I found this was really readable. I wanted to keep picking it up. I read it quite quickly just after Christmas, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm very glad that I read it. I definitely recommend this one. I then also took part in the Past and Future Readathon, which was hosted by Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, Jem from Gem of Books, and Jack from Spread Book Joy. One of the prompts was to spin a colour wheel and pick a book of the colour that the wheel lands on, which was blue for me. And so I picked up a book that I've had on my shelves for ages, which was The Little Book of Hygge by Meik, Wiking. This was a gift that one of my friends got me. And so Hygge, I'm sure everyone knows what Hygge is, but it's kind of like a Danish word for sort of everything that's represented by sort of coziness and being with family and loved ones and friends, and spending time like kind of slow living with nice things around you, nice food, coziness, warmth, candles, nice smells, all those kinds of things. This is a pretty book, so it's got some lovely photos in the book, as well as having lots of nicely set out text. There's lots of nice things, and I do agree with the concept of Hygge. And there's a lot about the author's work at the Happiness Research Institute in Denmark as well. The criticism I have of this book, one is that I think this version of Hygge requires money. And he does talk about money and says, you don't necessarily need money to do things which are Hygge-like, which I would totally agree with. But then he also goes on to say, we really like certain brands in Denmark and certain types of lights and different things like that. And when I looked them up, they were like super expensive. And the other thing is, I don't think that this is at all inclusive, this book, because everybody in all of the photos, every single photo is white, and I would say in their kind of late 20s, early 30s. And so this book feels like a book for middle class white young people, and I don't think that was the author's intention, but I think that there was no effort to make this book an inclusive book, which is a real shame. And I think that Hygge can be for absolutely everybody. There's nothing that says Hygge is for a certain type of person. So I gave it 3 stars because it did have some really nice ideas and stuff in here. There was a lot about eating meat in it, which obviously I don't appreciate, but it was like, I do like the kind of concept behind Hygge. So it was just a little bit disappointing, like I say, that it wasn't an inclusive book. Another one of the prompts from the Past and Future Readathon was to catch up on a series. And so I decided to read book number 5 in the Heartstopper series, which everybody knows I really love. I love this series so much. Every single book, including this one, is a 5-star read in the series for me. We're now at the point in the series where Nick, Elle and Tara are having a look into universities, and so their partners are all facing long distance relationships. And also Nick and Charlie are thinking about having sex for the first time as well. And all of the things in this book are a little bit different, I'd say, in a good way, to the previous ones, because Nick's always been there as the big support for Charlie, and I feel like this time around the book's more focusing on Nick, and Nick feeling a bit lost, not really sure where he wants to go to uni, what he wants to study, how he feels about being away from Charlie, and Charlie being his support system. And it's very sex positive in this book as well. I think it's really good for young people. It sets a really good example, and I think that it covers something which loads of young people go through. I know I went through, I was in a relationship, my boyfriend was 2 years older than me, and we went through the long distance relationship thing when he went off to university about 3 hours away from where I lived. So I've sort of remember that time and how hard it was, and I think it's really good that stuff like that is covered in books as well. So this was beautiful as always, and 5 stars. Then I listened to I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, which I buddy read with Joe, who buddy reads with me every month. And this one I listened to for the first time 10 years ago, and then I rated it 3 stars. And I always felt a bit sad that I only rated it 3 stars, because I really think a lot of Maya Angelou. But I actually did rate it 3 stars again this time, because it was really, really good in places and really not so good in other places. So like when the book starts off, she is living in Stamps in Arkansas with her brother Bailey and her grandmother, who's raised her and Bailey. Grandmother owns a store in Stamps and is like a central figure in the community, and it's all about her experiences as quite a strict church-going upbringing with a very matriarchal household, her sort of scrape she gets into with her little brother, and also there's some really funny bits in it as well. Like there's a scene where they're in church, and it's one of the funniest scenes that I've read in a book. It's really, really good. And I loved all the bits that were set in Stamps. But then their parents decide that they want them back. And their parents are separated, so they spend some time living with their dad, sometimes living with their mum, sometimes together, sometimes not. And those bits were much less flowing, and the time differences were quite marked. So in Stamps, I guess the pace of life was slower, so you'd spend a lot of time hearing about certain things. And when they moved to other places to be with their parents, months would go past in a few minutes in the book, and the pacing didn't feel quite right for me. Sometimes there were chapters which were really boring and other chapters which were really enjoyable. And I am going to try, I've got books 2 and 3 in paper form, so I'm going to try going on to the next book. I don't think Joe is just to see what it's like, and if it's more, enjoyable. I just wanted to stick with how the first bit of the book was in terms of style and pace, but it was written a long time ago. I think it was written in the 60s, this book, so it may be that as time, it's her first book, it may be that as the series goes on they kind of improve in writing style, possibly. But yeah, so that was that one. And then the final book that I read in January was my book club book, which I was really glad that I read because I really enjoyed it. And this is Q by Christina Dalcher. She wrote Vox, which I remember was quite big on booktube a few years ago, about if women could only say a certain number of words per day. And this one is another kind of similar sort of concept, but this one separates society by their IQ, which is called their Q score. So everybody from babies to school age to adults is put through these tests, and babies have to go through these tests in the womb. And if a baby has a low Q score, their mother is allowed to terminate the pregnancy at whatever stage, and will be not charged anything to do so, and will be kind of praised for not bringing a low Q scoring baby into the world. So it's a very eugenics based society, and it's getting more and more controlled. Each school child is either silver, green or yellow, silver being the highest Q score, yellow being the lowest. If you move to a yellow score, then you have to leave your family and go and be in a rural school where you get to see your family 3 times a year. And the students are constantly fighting not to be in a yellow school, and parents, if they, or adults, have to do performance tests, and depending on how they score depends on the kind of job they get, the kind of income, the kind of privileges that they receive in life. So it's a very kind of screwed up society. And this is focusing on one family of 2 parents and 2 daughters. One daughter is in the top tier, another daughter is heading for a yellow school. And the parents, the dad works for the Department of Education. He is a very big proponent of the whole system. And the mum is like desperate for this whole system to break down because she doesn't want her kid to be sent away to one of the yellow schools, and she thinks this has all gone much too far. Although it turns out as we go along that she drops us these little bits of information which tells us that she was actually quite instrumental in starting the scheme in the first place. And she's obviously now realised that it's a massive disaster. So it's about, there's a lot of discussion and ethics and stuff around how we treat different people in society and around eugenics as well. It's quite scary, but it's really fast-paced and really exciting, and I wanted to keep reading it all the time. I didn't want to put it down. I was really gutted because I was actually ill for book club, so I had for a week, I had a whole week off work because I had some horrible virus. It felt like COVID. I don't know if it was COVID or not, but it was that kind of feeling, and it started like just before, the day before book club, so I didn't get to go to the discussion for this, which I was really sad about. But I think everybody enjoyed it, but it would have been a really good one to discuss. So I definitely recommend this book. So that was all of the books that I read in the month of January. I really, really hope that my microphone works this time. I will find out in a minute. And if you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them, and let me know what your favourite book was from January. And I will see you in another video very soon. Have a lovely week. Bye.